Mr. Clark,
Yes?
it's time for the meeting.
Are they all here?
Yes, sir.
Well, I read all these. Recommendations from each department. If I followed them, you know how long this new movie would take?
No, sir. But I guess the audience had better bring a box lunch.
And a sleeping bag.
That's what Mr. Stewart said, too.
Stewart?
The writer from the movie producers.
Oh, Tom Stewart. He's here now, too, eh? All right, show them in.
Yes, sir.
All right, gentlemen, let's get started. Now, we have films on our passenger service, a service of which we're very proud. But I think we all agree that what we need is an overall film on our freight service. Now, some of the information will be known to most of our viewers. But we've got a lot of new stuff, right?
Right. But how are you going to make a film like that? The recommendations I have here show that each department is trying to dominate the film.
You see, fellas, what kind of an impression you make on an outsider? I'll tell you this, Tom. All we have to do is see that they don't get away with it. All right. Now, how do we start this film?
With an animated map of our system. Everybody knows where our lines go. I'm sure everybody knows one thing, that we provide through service between Chicago and the West Coast and Chicago and the Gulf. But does everybody know the full extent of the system? Remember, altogether, the Santa Fe provides transportation service for more than 2,000 communities over its more than 13,000 miles of main and branch line railroad, serving all kinds of industries, mines, farms.
May I make a suggestion? Now, suppose you tell me, somebody not connected with the railroad, that you serve San Francisco. Well, I don't stop to think that you have to get the cars across San Francisco Bay. Now, that's why I was so surprised to see what the boys out there call the Santa Fe Navy. You know, I think almost everybody would be interested in seeing that operation out there, how you take to the water to complete the run.
Did you notice as the cars were loaded on the barge, that flat car with a covered load of wallboard? Well, that car is specially bulkheaded for that job. And speaking of seagoing cargo, don't forget the Santa Fe serves many other ports. Los Angeles, Long Beach, San Diego. And in Texas, Beaumont, Houston, Texas City, and Galveston. And of course, Chicago.
Oh, I wouldn't forget that. I remember being down on the docks at Long Beach and at Houston, watching them load potash aboard a ship. Santa Fe had brought the potash from the mines, and now it was headed out across the ocean to some faraway port. But the point I'm making is this. In a film, we have to show visually the things that we want to say about your company.
Right. And for some things, that's easy. For example, we have, as you probably know, freight sales and service offices in every major city on Santa Fe lines. In addition to that, almost a third of our freight sales and service offices are located in offline cities to give local and individual service to offline shippers and consignees. To put it in a nutshell, we're set up to give an individual service in every area and community in the United States. But when you say you have to show things visually, well, how are you going to take a picture of service?
Well, let me give you an example of one aspect anyway. Now, while we may not actually be able to show the services performed by the freight salesmen and other personnel, we can show how you enroll them in schools, you train them with special assignments, and you keep them up to date with meetings and conferences.
Doesn't it come down to this, Stan, that what the film can show is the equipment, the facilities that can back up our claim to superior service?
Now you've got it. Take a company which cans food. That company goes to a lot of trouble to make a good product. They put their label on it. Now, when it comes to shipping, they want their product to be protected against radical changes in temperature. So they use our SFRB cars, insulated cars that will not vary drastically in temperature and have special lading devices that eliminate dunnage. Or take another example. A company making chemicals. For some of their products, a conventional boxcar may be fine. On the other hand, some of their other products may be particularly susceptible to damage or breakage, or may require special bulkheading. So we furnish a special car similar to SFRB cars without insulation. A DF or SL car equipped with special devices to retain and protect the lading. They have belt rails running along the side of the car. The lading is quickly and effectively secured, and the crossbars locked into place.
As a matter of fact, carrying that trend along, we ought to show how we're improving and specializing our conventional rolling stock where necessary. For example, for the automobile industry, these boxcars with double doors are fitted with specially equipped racks and other retaining devices for the shipment of instrument panels, fenders, axles, steering assemblies, windshields, and other auto parts. Covered gondola cars are used increasingly for the shipment of steel and aluminum. And the flat car is actually a very versatile piece of equipment, carrying everything from trailers to farm and road machinery, like these bulldozers, and even missile engines in their special containers.
Of course, we should mention that we have flat cars with depressed centers for especially tall and heavy shipments, generators and the like. The development of cars with shock control is our newest big gun in the war against damage. These cars have a floating underframe. An impact drives the center sill like a piston into a hydraulic cylinder, which acts as a cushion. This action absorbs shock and can protect the car and its contents from damage at impacts up to 12 miles an hour. A car equipped with DF or SL retaining devices and shock control provides the utmost in protection, maximum insurance that the lading will arrive in good order.
Well, if you're going to talk about special cars, I sure want to get our MTC cars in.
Why not first give us a rundown on our refrigerator service generally?
Well, first, we have some 13,500 refrigerator cars, over 95% equipped with circulating air fans. Maybe this is beginning backwards, but I'd like to point out that at Wichita, we have a large-scale modernization program in operation which places our refrigerator cars in first-class condition and keeps them there. Incidentally, you realize that our refrigerator cars can become heated cars in the winter with thermostatically controlled liquid fuel heaters. To get back to the modernization program, of course, our modernized all-purpose refrigerator cars are of all steel construction with the latest type sliding doors. All of them have permanent steel floor racks for the effective circulation of air throughout the car. Proper circulation of cooled air, as I said, is achieved by fans, now for all practical purposes, universal on SFRD cars. The modernization program is a large-scale operation, handling a considerable volume of cars. We're pretty proud of it in the refrigerator department. We think it's another reason why it's wise to ship Santa Fe all the way. All right, now you want a minute on our refrigerator service. Let's talk about icing. When produce is entrusted to our care, it becomes our responsibility to see that correct temperatures are maintained to protect the shipment. Icing is done by electrically operated machines at the principal mainline icing stations. These machines are pretty striking in terms of efficiency. They fill a 307 cubic foot bunker in 60 seconds. Or to put it another way, they can load about 300 tons of ice per hour. Naturally, icing stations are strategically located along the main line to re-ice as necessary to protect the shipment. Cliff, one thing we've got to cover is our diversion and reconsignment setup.
Absolutely.
What's that?
Say a carload of lettuce starts out for Chicago from California. While it's on its way, the shipper finds he'd get his best price in Houston. We're set up to divert that car and reconsign it. The diversion order is received in our department. A diversion telegram is sent to the proper yard where the diversion can be effected. The car is cut out of the eastbound train, switched to the proper classification track, and soon the diverted and reconsigned car is speeding to a new and more profitable market. Cliff, this is important to shippers. A highly efficient setup for diversion and reconsignment.
Well, we get enough practice at it. It's a valuable part of our service. But Bill, you know, some minutes ago, you started out talking about MTC.
You fellas sure talk a language all your own. What's MTC?
MTC means mechanical temperature control. No icing, no re-icing. This car came about largely as a result of frozen foods. For example, take a company making frozen fruit juices. The shipment has to be maintained at a sub-zero temperature even when it's in transit through the desert where it's 120 degrees in the sun. Our MTC cars are the answer. There's a growing demand for these cars in the transportation of other perishable commodities, particularly vegetables. We can maintain a temperature anywhere in the range from plus 70 to minus 10.
But how do you maintain the temperature?
Thermostatically. An MTC car has coils like the refrigerator in your kitchen. Power is supplied by a diesel unit. The car is designed so that the entire diesel unit can be removed easily for repair or replacement without damage to the shipment and without tying up the car.
You mean that our policy is to buy or build special cars of every type to serve our customers, to maintain them so they're available when needed. But Bill, to conclude your story, I was thinking about how we utilize our empty westbound refrigerator cars.
You mean Mahoney Transfer in Kansas City? Well, as you say, Cliff, we utilize the westbound movement of empty refrigerator cars to perform a valuable and time-saving service. Say a shipper has a carload of traffic containing shipments destined for 2, 3, or 4 points in the west. That boxcar is unloaded at Mahoney, thus making it available for other traffic in the Kansas City area. We then put those shipments into individual refrigerator cars for delivery direct to the exact destinations. This means the original boxcar load does not have to make the 1, 2, or 3 physical stops before reaching final destination, thus eliminating delays. More and more shippers are taking advantage of this service.
Mary, will you collect some industrial district brochures and have Phyllis bring them in? Thank you. Now, Tom, something on your mind?
Yes, there is. You know, I've talked about this film with a number of your people. Now, not being connected with the railroad, maybe I've got a different point of view.
Well, for example?
Well, take your fast freight schedules. Joe, what are your exact figures on that?
Well, first, overnight service from Chicago to Kansas City. Then, 5th morning delivery from Chicago to California. Now, 4th morning delivery on traffic originating in Chicago. Even on New York originated traffic. 5th morning delivery in California. We have a Chicago to California running time of 60 to 65 hours, day in and day out. Wasn't so many years ago when that was a pretty fair passenger schedule.
To me, that's amazing.
I agree. But let's not overlook the fact that we have good eastbound schedules, too. Tom, you were making a point about a difference between you and us people on the railroad.
Yes. You know, I think that shippers are interested in the things that make fast and reliable schedules possible. Now, for example, we know you have to have heavier rail, better road beds for a train weighing almost 5,000 tons to hurtle along at 60 miles an hour. This development of welded rail to replace the old rail, which had a joint every 39 feet, I find highly interesting. Who can resist the picture of sparks flying as they do in that machine that welds the 39-foot rail sections into lengths 1/4 mile long? And the way the rail is unloaded. special caissons spacing it next to the rail to be replaced, a quarter of a mile of flat cars slipping out from under the long, long lengths of rail. Or take another example, the revolution in maintenance of track and roadbed. I watched the mechanical tie unloader, which was developed by your own engineers. How the spotter gives a signal for ties to be dropped, how a tie is pushed from the rack to be ready for the mechanized tie gang that will follow the 14-car train. You want another example?
Sure.
All right. When I was out in Clovis, New Mexico, I saw this man coming out of a car and putting some sort of a card on it. It was explained to me that he was a car inspector and that the card told what repairs or changes must be made in the car. Then I saw your upgrading program at work. Carpenters just replacing a board or building a completely new sidewall. Whatever the inspector had determined must be done to put the car in proper condition. I saw cracks between floorboards filled in with a plastic composition and then smoothed down. Even an ordinary operation like steam cleaning. Ordinary to you, but a lot of us don't realize it goes on. And then this car, for example, was lined to prevent leakage and loss. And when all the work is completed, the car is re-inspected and carded for the service for which it is suitable. Why, there's so many examples. I could go on and...
Tom, there's another point. To make speed, we have to add power. Not only are we putting more horses on the head end by using additional units, but there's something else that's helping us maintain these new fast schedules. And that's our new 2,400 horsepower turbocharged diesels.
As a matter of fact, I think it'd be a good idea to include a few shots on how your mechanical department maintains your equipment.
What sort of thing do you have in mind?
Take the diesel shops. It's a mighty impressive sight to see the giant diesels come into the shop for servicing. Of course, more important than being just an impressive sight, regular servicing is an important guarantee of reliability. And inside the shop, those diesels really get a going over. As I remember, someone told me that the body of that diesel, the part they're lifting up, weighs 65 tons. Of course, your diesels are immense in all respects. When the engine is torn down, repaired, and reassembled, I saw the mechanics sight along the A-frame like a surveyor to make sure that all the bearing surfaces were perfectly aligned. The electrical parts of the diesel locomotive, of course, also have to be put in like new condition. Wheels have to be machined. Hundreds of various operations performed, and performed so thoroughly that when a diesel leaves the shop, it can be depended on for another 100,000 miles of reliable, trouble-free service.
Yes, Phyllis?
Here are the industrial district brochures.
Oh, fine. Spread them out on the desk here, will you? Now, Tom, these brochures describe some of our industrial districts where we have excellent properties for sale or lease. Stan, just to change the pace a little, I was going to ask you to spend 20 seconds on our industrial development service.
Well, I imagine most everybody knows that we have many industrial districts and that there are plenty of industrial properties all along the system for sale or lease. Tom, those brochures are put out by our industrial development department. They describe these properties and the communities in which they're located, answering many questions a firm would have to know before they'd consider locating there. But, as I say, I imagine most everybody knows all about this. What they might not know is that our development staff is prepared to wrap up a whole package, so to speak. We see that the property is properly zoned and platted. The necessary restrictions to protect property owners are written into the deeds, that water and sewers are brought in. streets and siding and feed lines laid out. We're prepared to help secure financing or to have a facility constructed at a specific cost or annual rental. In a word, if desired, we'll get together everybody needed from architect to financier.
Thank you, Stan. Well, here's Earl.
Come in, Earl.
You know all these gentlemen? And this is Tom Stewart, who's helping us on this freight movie. Earl Dillman.
Hello, Tom.
Earl has to address a gathering of communications engineers in just a few minutes, so we'll give him the floor right away. Earl, you know what we want.
Well, you want to know what should be in the film about Santa Fe Communications, right? Well, to begin with, we have one of the largest private communication systems in the world. We have more than 250,000 wire miles in our communication network. But what I think we ought to talk about are the new things. The fact that we're constantly bringing into use different and better ways of communication. You know that Santa Fe pioneered engine-to-caboose radio on transcontinental trains. This is now commonplace. Trains can also be called by radio from points along the line. One of the places where improved communications really speed service is in our yards. Yardmasters are able to talk to switch crews and direct their activities quickly and efficiently. Yard phones also speed up operation. Questions can be answered and instructions given without loss of time. That's a two-way phone. The member of a switch crew talks and listens. Walkie-talkies are also used in yards. There are areas where interference makes it desirable to use other types of communication rather than walkie-talkies. In the Corwith Yard at Chicago, for example, our car checkers carry a phone which they can plug in at many locations in the yard. Phone reports can also be recorded on tape for transcription when the information is needed. Another recent development is the substitution of microwave relays for the further expansion of pole lines. The waves we use are on the order of 7 billion cycles per second, and they can be beamed much like light waves. Each microwave path will handle up to 120 telephone channels, some of which are used for telephone conversations, and some to actuate teletype machines. The link we're now looking at is between Kansas City and Topeka. The parabola focuses the microwave beam. Repeater stations receive, amplify, and pass on the signals. At the end of the path, a reflector bounces the waves to an antenna below. You know, you think of a railroad operating with its rolling stock, its tracks and roadbeds, but if I may get in a plug for my department, instantaneous and completely reliable communications are equally indispensable.
You're right. Now, Earl, I know this isn't strictly in your field, but you know all about it. Give us a rundown on the Santa Fe car location service.
All right. Our car service red ball department at Topeka is the hub of all car record information. They receive by teletype a report of every train operating on the railroad. We call them wheel reports, and they list every car in the train, car initials and number, kind of car and its contents, online destination, gross and net tonnage, and so on. These reports are continually supplemented with auxiliary reports on forwarding, passing, and arrival times from key stations over the system. From this information, reports of cars moving into each traffic district are teletyped to our traffic offices over the country. In addition, all of these wheel reports, when received at Topeka, actuate a remote tape reperforator. This gives us a punched tape, which, when run through a tape-to-card machine, creates a punched card at the rate of 3,000 per machine hour for each car being moved on the system. Every reported move is posted from the punched card to a master card. Car location is furnished automatically to consignees of carload red ball freight. If for any reason information is needed from red ball headquarters, reference to the master card file immediately locates the car.
Earl, I want to thank you for stopping by.
Well, I'm glad to help. Nice to meet you, Tom. I'll see you fellas later.
See you, Earl.
Frank, we haven't said a word about a highly important subject, rates.
I want to make 3 points. The officers of this company are thoroughly familiar with rates and rate adjustment. I mean the top officers. We belong to every freight rate bureau of any consequence in the Western Territory. Any Santa Fe freight salesman can get information on rates for any customer, online or off. A request for a rate or an adjustment is given top-level attention. The facts are ascertained, and every effort is made to set a fair and equitable rate, one that will attract the business and make it possible for us to realize a reasonable profit on its movement. In a nutshell, these are the main points about Santa Fe rates.
Thanks, Frank. Now, I think we have only one point left to cover. That's fast, dependable, over-the-road service. Let's start in the yard. That's where the train starts. Joe, tell us about our modern electronic yards.
All right, let's start with the engine foreman. He has his consists in front of him, and he tells the pin puller what cuts to make. Of course, he's tied in by intercoms with the yardmaster and the retarder operator. When a car goes over the hump, an electronic device utilizing radar and computers instantly measures the speed, friction, and other characteristics of the moving car and automatically actuates pneumatic retarders. The main retarder and the group retarders ensure that the car will be moving at 4 miles an hour or less when it couples in the classification track. The retarder operator can instantly take over the entire system or any part of it should there be an electronic failure. Switching is automatic. 5 switch movements can be stored in advance of the arrival of the cars at the switches. The system can handle 4 cars a minute. The yardmaster is in direct contact with and in control of switch crews. Cars approaching the hump pass over an inspection pit. You might call this the opposite of a bird's eye view. Cars needing closer inspection or repair have their wheels sprayed with whitewash.
I've been out to the automatic retarder yard at Corwood. I've watched them work, and I still can't believe the way those computers take into account not only the car weight and speed, but the different characteristics of each single classification track.
Not only that, but the space remaining in the track, so that the more cars there are on the track, the more the next car will be slowed down. Cliff, what about our traffic control system?
All right, Joe, tell us about it.
Well, our traffic control system has increased the capacity of single-track road some 80%. A dispatcher sits before his console and arranges many times for 2 opposing trains, perhaps 100 miles away from him, to pass without either of them stopping. He can see on his board when one train enters the siding. Then, as the train on the main line moves into the block, that also shows up on his board. And then, as you can see, the 2 trains pass. No time is wasted. The traffic control system is one of the big factors in making fast, dependable over-the-road service possible. Cliff, I think we ought to get Bill to say a final word on piggyback.
Good idea.
Piggyback is, I suppose, the most flexible form of railroading there is. The trailer picks up the load at the shipper's dock. Without unloading or reloading, it is delivered in the same trailer right at the consignee's door. We have various sizes and kinds of trailers and special flat cars, some up to 88 feet long, to accommodate 2 40-foot trailers. We have trailers from 24 to 40 feet, open, closed, insulated, refrigerated. There is a Santa Fe trailer to fit every need, every type of shipment. Piggyback is operated over the entire system. There is no question that the movement of trailers on flat cars is one of the fastest moving developments in railroading today. Incidentally, when completed, this freight house at Kansas City will be a part of a completely integrated freight facility, which will include specially designed piggyback docks.
Thank you, Bill. You know, we have a saying, nothing is permanent on the Santa Fe except progress. Well, I've been thinking of the things we've been talking about, and even more of the things we haven't even mentioned. Take the freight house at Dallas, for example. So in keeping with the progress and construction of the city itself. Or the tow there, in the enclosed dock, running some 600-odd feet. The dock warehouse setup permits the simultaneous loading and unloading of 64 cars. The tow bear completely encircles the transloading structure and can accommodate 250 platform trucks at a time.
And Cliff, there are dozens of other improvements we could show. Well, for just one example, our produce terminals. And one more thing.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You can't get everything into one film.
Well, Tom, remember I told you they were enthusiastic. Really, the thing I most regret leaving out is something that you couldn't possibly get into any film. And that's the spirit of Santa Fe people. All of us in this room know it to be a fact that just about everybody on this road, from the president on down, believes this to be a terrific railroad and wants to keep it that way. And I know of no better guarantee of superior service than that attitude on the part of our people. On our railroad, progress and people combine to guarantee superior service, to make sure that in the movement of freight, the best advice is ship Santa Fe all the way.